Near the baseboard, her light caught on something small, half buried in dust. She knelt, brushing aside flakes until a glass marble rolled into her palm, blue streaked with white, faintly glowing where light struck it. It felt oddly warm. She looked at him. Someone left this here. He shrugged, fighting a chill with logic. Just junk. Houses cough up tokens all the time. Not like this, she said, turning it in her hand. It's clean on one side, like it's been touched. He smiled faintly, trying to keep tone easy. Maybe the house liked the breeze. But the feeling lingered. Something once loved, waiting beneath plaster, whispering just enough to be heard. She took a step closer to the wall beside the fireplace. The draft was strongest here, cool, concentrated. She knocked lightly on the surface. A hollow sound replied, deeper than it should have. She tried again, slower. Wood behind plaster, empty space where there shouldn't be any. You hear that? He crouched next to her, tapping in 3 spots. 2 gave solid thuds. The third rang like a small drum. Could be a bad stud or old repair, he said, but his voice didn't sound convinced. They looked at one another. Quiet. Buying this house had exhausted most of their savings. Structural problems could ruin them before they started. She could see that thought flash across his face. He pressed his hands into his knees and stood. Let's not jump to it. We'll bring the sensor later, check for cavities behind. For now, let's see the rest. Upstairs, each room carried a different note of decay. One smelled of mothballs and dead air, another of faint tobacco. Faded curtains hung like ghosts of movement. On the landing wall, a photograph had been left behind, an oval frame with a faint blush-tinted portrait of a woman, eyes turned slightly away from the camera. Someone had scratched the lower corner until the nameplate was bare. When she touched the frame, it tilted slightly, and bits of plaster fell in powder swirls at her feet. Beneath that, a line of darker paint peeked out, almost a rectangular outline, fresher than anything else on the wall. He noticed. There used to be something else hanging there. She studied the clean marked shape, then let the frame fall back into place. Weird that the shades knew her, like someone covered it on purpose. Let's not drift too far, he muttered. We're here to plan repairs, not chase artwork. Still, she looked back once before moving on. The draft kept tugging faintly, following them room to room, brushing behind their steps like a quiet animal. By late afternoon, the light dimmed to a brownish gray. They sat on the porch, boots muddy, hands raw from carrying out debris. The quiet of the countryside pressed in differently now. No engines, no voices, no neighboring roofs. Just the wind through grass and the occasional creak of the house settling behind them. Feels alive, she said after a while. Alive? Yeah, like it's listening. He glanced at the door, half smiling, half thinking. If it is, it's probably judging our taste in paint. But her tone didn't lighten. She'd felt that slight vibration more than once that day. In the walls, the floorboards, even the way the door hinges breathed when opening. Not vibration exactly. Recognition. After dinner, simple canned soup on a camping burner, they decided to take one more pass through the first floor. The hallway by the sitting room carried the smell of damp wood stronger than before. When he set his flashlight beam low, it picked out small ridges across the baseboard where something had been patched hastily, maybe years ago. Old termite repair? He guessed. Maybe, she said, kneeling. Then she looked up sharply. Hold on. A soft sound, 2 taps in quick rhythm, came from inside the wall. Not loud, not echoing, just close. They froze. The beam of light hung still on flakes of white paint. Then a third tap, slower. "Probably the pipes," he said, too fast. "We haven't turned the water on." They listened. The hush returned, thick and unmoving. She reached for the wall again, placed her palm flat to the cool surface. Nothing stirred. He exhaled and let out a tense laugh. Old houses breathe, you know. They sigh, expand, contract, whatever. But she left her hand there a moment longer. Beneath the plaster was air. She could feel faint movement, not mechanical, not steady, like someone drawing breath on the other side, waiting. She stepped back. They decided to call it a night. Sleep came slow. The rain turned heavier, drumming on the roof in uneven rhythms. In the weak light from their single lamp, she studied the yellowed wallpaper near the foot of their camp bed. The printed flowers looked bruised with moisture. Somewhere downstairs, wood cracked softly, a sound both small and impossibly deep. When she finally drifted into uneasy dreams, the image returned. Her palm against that wall, the strange, soft air against her skin. Around midnight, she woke to silence. Even the rain had stopped. The old house held its breath again. Then came one faint, deliberate knock from below, echoing up through the floorboards. Just one. Then another. Slower. Farther down the hallway. She reached over, nudged him awake. "Did you hear—" Before she finished, the knock sounded again, lower than before, like from the sitting room. They looked at each other through the dim light, half sitting, half afraid to move. Neither spoke for almost a full minute. The sound didn't return. But the air had cooled, the same unseen draft curling through the doorway now, faint, persistent. He swallowed. "It's settling wood. Has to be." She nodded, but didn't lie back down. Her gaze stayed on the crack under the door where the lamplight ended. The draft traced across her bare ankle again. Deliberate, circling once before disappearing. He murmured, "Tomorrow, we'll check the foundations first thing." She whispered, "What if it's not the foundations?" The lamp flickered just once, then steadied. In the pause that followed, both of them listened so hard that silence itself started to sound alive. The house seemed to inhale deeply, timber groaning just enough to sound almost human. They stared toward the darkness of the hallway until their eyes stung. Somewhere behind the wall downstairs came a single, hollow thud, soft enough to question, clear enough to recognize. Neither moved. In that instant, the joy of their purchase and the crisp smell of rain were gone, replaced by a chill realization. Whatever lay within those walls had waited through years of neglect. And now, someone had finally come home. Morning sun groped weakly through the gray glass, coloring the air with dust. The storm had rinsed the fields clean overnight, leaving the world outside soft and still. Inside, though, the air felt swollen. Damp wood and metal tang twisting together like something ancient, breathing through the seams. They woke, stiff and quiet. Her first movement was toward the floorboards, pressing her heel slightly. Each board gave a faint sound, more sigh than creak. She took that as a sign. They still held. He busied himself with the generator, coaxing it to life. When the low hum finally rolled through the house, it cut the silence but didn't comfort it. By late morning, they fell into rhythm. She pried nails from window frames. He scrubbed soot from the fireplace. Every strike and scrape echoed too loud in the hollow rooms. The work kept their minds from drifting back to the knocks of the night before. Just tired wood, just shifting air, That's what they told each other whenever their eyes met too long. During lunch, they ate on inverted buckets near the front door. Canned beans, silence, shared glances. He tried to joke that maybe the house was warning them off bad cooking. She smiled, but the expression barely held. Her eyes kept drifting toward that same wall, the one where the draft had traced her hand. It wasn't fear she felt, something quieter, like curiosity pulling against caution. The afternoon light fell unevenly through the patched windows. She moved toward the hallway again, broom in hand. The temperature changed with each step, warmer by the doorway, colder as she neared the sitting room. The chill along the wall almost hummed now, a vibration more sensed than heard. She stopped sweeping. A faint smell rose with it, not mold, not gas, earthy, like freshly turned soil after rain. He noticed her pause. "You're hearing it again?" "Not hearing," she murmured. "Feeling." Electric lines could run behind that wall. "We haven't even restored power," she said softly. That silenced them both for a moment. Then he returned to his tools, choosing noise over thought. She followed, but the chill lingered at her back, stubborn as breath. Days passed looping like that. Cleanup, repairs, just enough distraction to quiet the strange edges. They discovered small remnants of the previous life. A chipped teacup wedged behind a beam, a child's marble under a stair tread, brittle pages from old almanacs folded beneath wallpaper. Each fragment added to the hum of the place, small echoes of someone else's ordinary world. And every night, without fail, that certain hallway cooled enough to fog their breath. On the fourth morning, she noticed new details, faint streaks near the baseboard, two even for water damage. She squatted with the flashlight, tracing fingers across the marks, thin arcs etched lightly, maybe by a tool edge or a nail. Not writing exactly, not random, almost deliberate patterning repeating every 12 inches. When he saw her crouched like that, he sighed the way he did when patience was thinning. "We talked about inspecting after we finished the outer structure," he said. "I know, but look at these. Probably some builder's tally or repair measurement back in the day. Then why cover it under several layers of paper?" He straightened. "Because people hide ugly things under pretty walls all the time." She didn't reply. Her thumb traced one faint loop again, a shape closing in on itself like a symbol. The line shimmered with gray powder. Beneath it, she thought she felt a faint tremor. She pulled her hand away, fast. "Did you feel that?" He knelt beside her reluctantly, pressed his palm to the same section. "Nothing. Cold plaster. Your hands are freezing." She exhaled through a shaky laugh. "Maybe that's the story of this house. Cold plaster and overthinking." Still, both avoided that hallway after dark. By the weekend, they finished clearing the attic. Boxes collapsed at lighter touches, clothes disintegrated when lifted. Only one item resisted, an old frame wedged behind rafters. Inside the frame were four black and white photographs, edges cracked. Each showed the farmhouse from a different decade. In the earliest, a tall figure stood on the porch, face turned away. In the latest, roughly from the 197s, the same porch looked half rotted, no person visible. But in the window beside the door, a faint smudge resembled the outline of small hands pressed against glass. She stared at that image longer than she meant to. He chuckled uneasily. "Probably light damage." "Yeah," she said, "probably." She tucked the photos under her arm, unable to throw them away. That night, the generator failed early. They used lantern light instead. The glow softened corners but deepened shadows. Wind pressed against the boards with low moans. She lay awake listening, the photographs stacked near her coat. Around midnight, a faint scent drifted through, the same earthy smell. She sat up quietly. The draft traced across her hair this time, almost intentional. Downstairs, something shifted, floorboards bending, a single object lightly scraped. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. He stirred, half asleep. "Animals under the floor, maybe." But his tone betrayed uncertainty. In the morning, they found the photographs not where she'd left them. The edges of one curled against the doorframe to that same hallway, as though a breeze had delivered it there. She checked for open windows. None. He frowned, rubbing his neck. The rational part of him wanted coincidence. The tired part wanted explanation. She only said, "That's where it wants us to look." He laughed mostly to fill the air. Places don't want things. She looked up. Then why does it feel like it's waiting? They spent the afternoon mapping studs and frames for restoration. He measured, marked, tapped. Each knock along the surface carried its echo. 2 spots rang hollow, one exactly beneath the strange mark pattern. When he pressed the stud finder, the lights flickered awkwardly between full and empty. He frowned. "Some sort of cavity here. Doesn't read like normal insulation space." She leaned in. "How deep?" "Few feet, maybe. Could be an old flue or storage niche." "Or room," she murmured. He eased away from the wall and looked at her firmly. "If it's structural, we stop until we know. Budget's already stretched. If we collapse interior framing, we'll lose everything." She nodded because logic made sense, but curiosity already stirred beneath her agreement. They carried on measuring other walls, yet both kept glancing back at that single patch of plaster where the cold never faded. During dinner, she studied his face under lantern light, the worry creasing near his temple. "We can take it slow," she offered. "Clear the wallpaper, see what's behind before cutting anything." He hesitated, spoon halfway to his mouth. Finally, "You won't let it rest, will you?" She smiled faintly. "Would you if the house kept calling through the walls?" That silenced him. Later, as they banked the generator for the night, he ran a hand over her shoulder. "One step at a time," he said. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "We start with that section." He opened his mouth to argue, then saw the look in her eyes. Not fear, not obsession, just steady resolve mixed with something gentler. Maybe belief that understanding a house meant listening to it. He shut the switch off. Darkness folded them in deeper than before. The house settled into nocturnal rhythm again, wood ticking faintly as it cooled. Somewhere down the hall, the cold gathered like mist, small and sure. If the farmhouse could have smiled, that would have been the moment. Through thin walls, 2 heartbeats steadied in sync above the quiet hum beneath the plaster. Something between a breath and a promise, waiting patiently to be found. By morning, the decision had already settled between them, unspoken but certain. She stood before the wall like someone facing an answer while he gathered the tools. The air in that hallway clung to their skin, cool even with sunlight threading through the curtains. Every sound, metal against wood, breath, the low buzz of the generator, seemed swallowed before it reached the corners. He handed her a scraper. "We'll start with the top layer, just to see." When she pressed the blade under the edge of faded wallpaper, the paper lifted with a sound like tearing fabric. Beneath it, another pattern appeared. Older, darker, almost floral yet abstract, petals blurring into spirals. The second sheet peeled away more reluctantly, revealing yellow plaster etched with faint lines. She brushed dust away and froze. "What is it?" he asked. She pointed. "These marks. Same pattern as before, but carved in." He crouched close, running a thumb across them. The texture bit back slightly, grooves packed with dirt. They formed no language he recognized, half circles and crosses intersecting like clockwork gears. "Maybe a builder's mark," he said, though his tone wavered. "Or maybe someone wanted to keep something remembered," she murmured. They moved methodically, peeling another panel south of the first. As plaster flaked, the symbols multiplied, forming a grid across the interior beam. Some were scorched faintly, as if once touched by flame. He leaned back on his heels. "That's deliberate. Someone spent time doing this." "Do you think it's decorative?" He glanced at the symmetry. "Not the kind you'd frame." Dust descended through the beam of light between them, lazy and hypnotic. She coughed softly, then pointed to a darker streak crossing two of the inscriptions. "See that? Like something leaked down." He wiped it with his sleeve. The stain looked too flat for paint, too old for moisture. "Rust, maybe. Nails behind." But when he tapped with the handle of the scraper, the response wasn't metallic. A hollow echo resonated, deep and oddly rounded. The same sound they'd heard that first night, now undeniable. She turned toward him slowly. "That's not pipes." He didn't answer. Instead, he fetched a flashlight and angled the beam along the crack where plaster met baseboard. A faint shift of air stirred the dust again. They kept scraping. Slower now, each strip of plaster opened the mystery wider. Wood slats visible through narrowed gaps, shadows behind them trembling with movement of light. At one edge, a section caved inward slightly when pressed. She gasped. "Rot," he said quickly, or animal tunnels." Yet when he pressed with his palm, the surface flexed like thin cardboard. He looked at her. Too thin. Outside, wind rattled branches against the eaves. The rhythm almost matched the heartbeat pulsing low in both of them. He fetched a knife, ran it gently along the seam. A tiny slice exposed layered dust behind. "Could be a false panel," he whispered. "Who hides panels in a sitting room?" she asked. "Someone who didn't want company finding it." A thump startled them both. Wood expanding down the hallway. But this one carried weight, intent. He steadied himself and exhaled. "All right, let's just finish this part and stop. Promise me." She nodded, but her hands didn't pause. Chips fell faster. Enthusiasm had taken hold of her nerves. Beneath the final scrap of covering, a narrow vertical seam appeared, straight and sharp against the warped boards. She traced it with her finger. Smooth, unlike the rough plaster around it. "There," she whispered. "Something joins here." He tapped just once. The echo came back rounded and hollow, almost chamber-like. They set their tools down, both unwilling to take the next step and unable not to. A knock sounded at the side door, clean, abrupt. They froze. The rhythm was human this time. He rose, wiped his hands, and stepped toward it. A figure stood outside the mesh screen. Older man, heavy coat despite the mild morning. He lifted two fingers in greeting. "Didn't mean to startle," he called. "Saw your truck and thought I'd say welcome." "Neighbor?" the man asked cautiously. "Closest one you'll find," the visitor said, voice rough with age. "Name doesn't matter much. Folks around here just call me the caretaker. Used to help the previous owner." She appeared behind her partner, brushing dust from her arms. You worked here? The caretaker nodded. Long ago, before the house went quiet. He blinked. Quiet? The man's eyes darted behind them toward the hallway. You're working in the west room, aren't you? The tension in her face must have answered for them because he lowered his gaze, removing his hat slowly. Best leave that wall alone. It's not bearing, but it carries memory. Old families didn't always put things out in the open. What do you mean? She asked. He hesitated. Rooms within rooms, miss, sometimes for storage, sometimes to shut sorrow in its place. He glanced between them. When the last owner passed, no one would buy this land, said the house grieved more than it stood. Her partner forced a light laugh, folding arms across his chest. That sounds like small-town story to worn-off buyers. Maybe, the man said softly, but stories keep you safer than truth sometimes. He handed over a folded scrap of paper. This was in the tool shed when I cleared it years ago. Never knew what it meant. Looks like a sketch. Figured it belongs to the house, not me. The paper, brittle as dried leaves, trembled in her hand. Lines crossed each other in jagged rhythm. A rough floor plan. At the center, scribbled words nearly faded to nothing, but one phrase caught under certain light. Remember the wall. Before they could look up, the caretaker had already stepped off the porch, muttering a farewell. Gravel crunched until silence swallowed him whole. They stared after him, the note fluttering between them. By late afternoon, clouds banked thick across the fields again. Inside, lamplight drew amber pools on the dust where they resumed work. Neither spoke of the warning. Both needed to know. The metal scraper slid through softer plaster until his hand brushed open air. Stop, she said quietly. He leaned forward, stripping the rest by hand. Behind the thin surface, dark boards formed an inset panel, slightly ajar. He pried it gently, nails squealing free one by one until the panel gave, revealing a depth scarcely wide enough for a single person to turn sideways. Cold air rushed through, tasting of earth and iron. The hollow was real. She aimed the light through it, revealing wood framings swallowed in darkness. Cobwebs rippled, and something metallic winked far back. He reached in carefully, fingers skimming empty space before touching a smooth curve, perhaps pipe or handle. There's something fixed here, he said. While he adjusted the beam, her peripheral vision caught movement. Just a shadow, sliding along inner boards too smoothly to be dust. She stepped back. Wait, did you see that? He turned. See what? It moved. Her whisper barely rose above her breath. Back there. He leaned in deeper, shaking the light. Nothing stirred, only the beam jittering across worn timbers. Animals, he offered. Fox or raccoon nesting. She said nothing, but her stomach tightened as if the house itself disapproved of the word animal. They lowered the panel and sat opposite the wall, breathing raggedly. Outside, wind strengthened, shaking the loose shutters in uneven rhythm. He finally said, "We should reinforce around this gap." "Not yet. Look at the caretaker's map again." She spread it across the dusty floorboards. The sketch matched the room almost exactly. Fireplace, doorway, window. But beyond the west wall, a square drawn in darker ink suggested extra space. She whispered, "It's a room. Could be storage between studs." "Too large for that." He said rooms within rooms. He rubbed his jaw, the rational part crumbling under weight of proof. If he's right, it's sealed for a reason. She touched the edge of the sketch. Every reason leaves a story behind. The lantern trembled slightly as if stirred by breath. He turned toward the sound of the draft, already knowing she wanted to continue. Tomorrow, he said again, quieter this time. We'll open it tomorrow. Night fell with unusual heaviness, pressing the windows tight. As they gathered their tools, the wall seemed to hum faintly, vibration thrumming through nails. He whispered, "You hear that?" She nodded. It's been waiting long enough. When they left the hallway, the lamplight dimmed behind them, then flared once, enough to reveal dust swirling into a faint pattern. Circles, overlapping like the carved symbols. Then stillness returned. In the silence that followed, a single, delicate sound slipped through the open seam. Half sigh, half whisper, as if something behind the wall exhaled for the first time in years. Relieved its secret was almost known. Morning found them slow to speak. Light angled through the torn curtains in faint stripes, dust drifting through it like pale smoke. The wall waited, patient and unchanged, but somehow louder in its silence. She tightened her gloves a notch. He checked the tools twice, though he'd done it already. "You ready?" she asked finally. He half smiled. "Ready enough." The first strike of the chisel echoed like it didn't belong to this century. A thin line of plaster split and fell away, powder bursting into the air. Another strike, then another. Chunks loosened faster than expected, revealing the dark skeleton of wooden laths beneath. The house didn't groan in protest. It sighed long and low, as if adjusting after a long hold. He steadied the beam of light while she pried at the broken section. Beneath the old laths, something gleamed faintly, a line of metal about shoulder height, embedded straight across. She scraped around it until the shape emerged, a narrow latch, no bigger than a finger. "Look at that," he murmured. She nodded, breath fogging. "It's a door." The air pressed colder as if the thought itself summoned weather. He tested the latch gently. It shifted, stubborn from rust, but not immovable. The creak of its pivot was thin and pained, echoing into the hollow beyond. For a second, both simply stood still, heads tilted toward that sound like listeners catching a faint melody. Then he inhaled deeply and pulled. The plaster veneer gave way in one long shiver. Dust burst outward. Behind it, a narrow vertical panel loosened from its frame and opened inward, revealing a slice of blackness that swallowed their lamplight whole. She raised a hand toward the opening. Cold rolled out in a single wave, sharp enough to sting her throat. The smell that followed was unmistakable, wet earth and iron, sealed decades too long. "Careful," he warned, but she was already leaning forward, angle of her light trembling slightly in her grip. Within that darkness, shapes started to define themselves. Edges of a small table, a faint gleam of glass, something hanging against the far wall that might once have been fabric. "It's a room," she breathed. He crouched, testing the threshold. The wood there was solid, if uneven. "How deep?" 6, maybe 7 feet across." He pushed the beam higher. The ceiling inside was low, pressed close like an attic crawlspace, but finished with the same boards as the rest of the house. Cobwebs braided in every corner. The air moved minimally, one slow exhale for every motion they made. They exchanged a glance. Then, without a word, she stepped through first. Her boots sank faintly into soft dust. The beams swept across a writing desk positioned beneath a small, bricked-over window. The chair lay tipped beside it, one leg splintered. On the desk sat a rusted key as thick as her thumb, a glass inkwell with traces of dried black along its rim, and a folded envelope sealed with a wax crest dulled to brown. He stood just behind her shoulder now, voice close. Someone locked themselves in here. She shook her head slowly. No, someone wanted this hidden. Cobwebs tickled her wrist as she reached for the letter. The wax held firm even under her thumb. She turned it over. The script on its front had nearly faded, but the lines still trembled faintly, pressed with heavy hand long ago. A name sprawled there in looping ink neither of them recognized. He crouched beside her, eyes scanning every corner. No other entry. They sealed this from inside or bricked the window after. The lamplight caught something along the floorboards. A dark stain clustered near the base of the desk. He followed it with his eyes, jaw tightening. Could be ink, he muttered, though the pattern ran too wide and irregular. She traced the outline of the seam where the wall met floor. Maybe this is the guilt he wrote about, she said softly. He gave a short laugh meant to sound casual, but it fell flat. You're already writing the ghost story. Maybe the house already did. He motioned for her to step back as he turned the desk slightly. Dust lifted in soft clouds. Beneath it, shoe prints. Small, facing the wall. The faint marks of two toes protruding deeper into the wood where someone might have stood waiting, unmoving for a long time. They both straightened. Child? She asked. Maybe. He pointed to a small wooden figure wedged between the desk legs, a carved animal, ears missing. He picked it up carefully. Or maybe someone who wanted to remember one. Silence pushed in. Even the faint hiss of the wind had retreated. She studied the sealed envelope. We should open it outside. There's something about this air. It doesn't feel right. He nodded quickly. Agreed. Before leaving, she swept the light one last time around the room. Near the blocked window shimmered faint traces of something painted. Curling letters, almost invisible beneath soot. She stepped closer until her breath blurred the dust away. 2 words emerged in looping hand. Forgive me. Her throat tightened. She barely whispered, Did you see? Then the beam flickered and died. He cursed softly, tapping the lantern. The glow returned in fits before stabilizing. Loose contact, he said, but his voice had dropped. They exited carefully, leaving the panel open. The farmhouse temperature rose palpably once they crossed back to the hallway. She drew deep breath like surfacing from deep water. The air smelled cleaner here, less metallic. Outside, the afternoon sun burned through a slit in the clouds. They stepped onto the porch, hands dusted gray. She held the sealed letter up to the light. The wax gleamed faintly red now, alive in brightness. He stuffed his hands in pockets. If there's money or something valuable, we call it in properly. No surprises. It doesn't feel like that kind of secret, she said. What kind, then? The kind that outlives everyone who wrote it. Birds chattered somewhere near the fence line, breaking the house's long silence. He eased onto the porch step beside her. They sat that way for a full minute, half expecting the world to rearrange itself after what they'd uncovered. Finally, he said, We could put everything back. Say we found nothing. Pretend we never saw the latch. You really want that? He rubbed his palms together, dust smearing. No, but once you open one door like that, you never stop wondering about the next one. She ran her thumb along the edge of the envelope. The wax caught a splinter of sunlight like a heartbeat. Then let's open it carefully, but not now. I need to know what the right way feels like first. They spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning the threshold, collecting the fallen plaster, stacking boards. Neither spoke about the strange warmth that had crept back into the house. or the way the lingering chill had vanished the moment they exposed the hidden chamber. Instead, they worked quietly, rhythm aligned, steady, like people rebuilding a bridge rather than breaking one. Toward evening, they carried their camp chairs outside. The clouds glowed dull copper above the fields. Behind them, the farmhouse stood straighter somehow, its outline clean against the dusk. He reached for her hand without thinking. She didn't pull away. "Tomorrow we read it," she said. "Tomorrow," he agreed. Just as he said it, a faint clatter sounded from inside, a soft bump, the sort caused by weight shifting on wood. They both turned sharply toward the open doorway. "Probably debris settling," he muttered. But he didn't move to check. She looked down at the letter again. The wax impression seemed deeper now, edges pressed inward like a fingerprint that hadn't been there before. "You see that?" she asked quietly. He leaned closer. The seal, indeed, looked freshly pressed, as though the wax had warmed in her hand. He swallowed. "Maybe sunlight softened it." She nodded. "Maybe." The air cooled again, a breeze setting the grass swaying in low waves. Behind them, the open wall moaned slightly, a sound between timber strain and breath. It carried no menace, only release. She exhaled slowly, realizing her chest had been tight since morning. "Whatever was waiting in there," she said, "I think it wanted to be found." He stood, brushing at his jeans, glancing inside. "Then maybe we gave it what it needed." The farmhouse settled with a slight click from distant rafters, like a sound of acknowledgement. They gathered their tools and stepped back through the doorway one more time. The inner air met them neutral now, almost normal. On the threshold to the hidden room, a trail of dust traced the pattern of two small footprints, perfectly formed, facing the hall. Neither spoke. He reached out, closed the panel gently until it latched with a soft catch. The draft that had haunted the house ceased at once. Night came quick, streaking the windows with violet. As they prepared their simple meal, the letter rested on the table between them, silent, waiting. When the first match hissed to flame, he said, "You still think we'll read it tomorrow?" She smiled faintly. "Tomorrow feels close enough." Outside, crickets tuned up under the eaves. Behind the sealed panel, dust settled back into stillness, leaving only one faint echo, a sound almost like a sigh, carrying gratitude in its release. They waited until morning sunlight thinned the fog across the fields before unsealing the envelope. The makeshift breakfast table, a plank over two crates, wobbled slightly as she set the letter down. The wax glimmered faint crimson again, softer now, pliant under her thumb like it wanted to release its hold. He cleared his throat. "You sure about this?" She nodded once, jaw tight. The thin knife slid beneath the flap with a hesitant sound, wax cracking apart in one fragile line. They both leaned close as she unfolded the brittle paper, the scent of age lifting quietly into the air, dust, iron, and something faintly floral, like a ghost of dried lavender crushed long ago. Ink bloomed across the page in rushed, uneven strokes. The handwriting shook visibly even before the trembling light made it dance. She began to read aloud. "To whoever finds these words, forgive what I have done. What was lost inside these walls does not rest easy. I built its sleep myself and could not bear the sound of it calling through the winter nights." Her voice snagged on the last sentence. He reached for the page, but she kept reading, softer now. "It began with the laughter," the letter continued, "a sound small as birds, then gone again. I thought it grief's trick, but Each night it came back from the hollow behind the west room. A breath, a whisper, sometimes a name I could not answer without breaking. The pen marks grew darker near the bottom, strokes heavier as if pressed through tears or anger. I sealed the wall to quiet it. God forgive me, I sealed more than a voice. The child should have known the world. She deserved rain, not plaster and silence. May the house remember for me. Silence stretched out between them so long it became part of the room. He exhaled, rubbing his temple. Could be fiction. People wrote letters like that for confession's sake. She turned the page. The last line swerved oddly across the parchment, slanting upward as the ink thinned. Whoever finds me, lay her to rest. The noise will stop then. And if the ink still glistens, she is not done forgiving. They looked down. In the light, the sentences shimmered faintly wet, not damp from their breath, wet like freshly written. A droplet gathered at one curve of ink and slid, staining her thumb. He leaned back, fast. That paper's decades old. I saw you crack the seal yourself, she whispered. The walls tightened around them. The sunlight through the window seemed to dim, though no clouds passed. She set the letter aside carefully, palms trembling. It mentioned a child, she said. Maybe those small prints we saw weren't tricks of dust. He swallowed. Even if something happened here, it was generations ago. You can't tell what's real by one letter. But the air shifted colder anyway. The lamp, though unlit, ticked softly in its glass. The wind outside had stilled. Even the buzzing flies seemed to pause mid-air. He reached forward to gather the pages, intending to fold them again. As his fingers touched the paper, the edges rippled, faint sound like exhaling breath close to his ear. He jerked back. The letter lay still again. Static, he muttered. She met his eyes. From what source? A long pause. Then she rose, paced toward the open section of wall, newly patched with boards they'd nailed lightly overnight. The draft had vanished entirely, yet her instincts pulled her there again. She pressed her ear against the wood. At first, nothing. Then, a faint rhythm, slower than heartbeat, lower than memory. She drew back sharply. It's there. You heard something? She nodded. Like humming, but deeper, almost like someone breathing through the floor. He joined her, ear pressed to the same place. The sound came again, unmistakable once heard, a hollow sway, gentle but deliberate. They stepped away together. He laughed under his breath, but it sounded brittle. Air pressure. Difference between temperatures. Science can explain anything if you give it time. Her gaze drifted to the desk in the corner. Science doesn't write apologies on paper that bleeds. She picked up the letter again. The ink gleamed once more as sunlight caught it. Underneath the signature, a simple initial, new marks had appeared faintly, a second layer of words curling upward like reflection. She raised it closer. What is it? He asked. Another sentence. Look, it says, behind the chimney. He frowned, stepping closer to the hearth across the room. The blackened brick rose half a story, old mortar crumbling along its seams. He tapped one stone near the base. A deep echo responded, distinct from the rest. Could be the other side of the hidden chamber. She crouched, running her fingers along the bricks. One near the corner looked different. Smooth face where others were pocked. She pressed, it shifted slightly inward. Dust fluttered. He caught her wrist. Hold on, we don't know what the structure can take. Then just one check, she said. The brick came away with steady pressure, revealing a dark cavity behind, no bigger than a loaf of bread. Inside was a rolled bundle wrapped in muslin. Her hands trembled as she drew it out. They set it on the table beside the letter, unwrapping layer by layer until a small object slid free. A silver pendant shaped like a heart, tarnished nearly black, chain tangled. She turned it in her palm. The back bore faint engraving, a child's initials, perhaps the same as the letter's signature. He whispered, "That matches." The air thickened. The faint scent of earth deepened to cold stone. Suddenly, the lantern beside them flickered, though no draft brushed the flame. Both froze. The glow dimmed, flared, dimmed again, rhythm perfect with that low pulse they'd heard behind the wall. She whispered, "Do you feel it? The cold's moving." It crawled up their arms, down spines, not violent, mournful, like grief finding shape. The ink on the table gleamed brighter, as if struggling to illuminate. Then the faintest voice. Not spoken, sensed. A sigh threading the air. One syllable, neither of them certain they heard it right. "Please." Her hand tightened around the pendant. "She's still here." He shook his head, backing half a step through nowhere to go. "We're hearing things now." The lamp's flame tilted sideways, stretching toward the west wall like drawn by a magnet. That same wall where the panel waited. "Maybe she's pointing." "You're really saying—" She cut him off. "If the letter's right, whoever wrote it buried the truth inside these walls, maybe not metaphorically." He stared. "You mean remains?" The word hung heavy. Her breath hitched but steadied. "She asked to be laid to rest. The letter did. Maybe she needs us to finish it." The light shuddered once more, violent enough to make glass ring. Then it steadied. All colors drained from the flame until it burned pure white. His voice fell to a whisper. "If this is superstition, I'll play along just to end it." She knelt where the hearth met floor. The seam of bricks there looked newer, cement grayer. "Here," she said, "help me." They worked together, prying one stone loose, then another. Mortar cracked reluctantly. The sound echoed through the room like slow applause. Beneath, a hollow opened wide enough for a hand. She reached inside first, pulling out a handful of dry soil mixed with splinters of something fine. Wood, perhaps. Beneath that, cloth fragments clung around a small wooden lid. They unearthed a box no larger than a book, edges warped, nails rusted through. He set it gently on the table beside the letter and pendant. The air grew still again, unnaturally so, as if even dust waited for permission. She whispered, "We can open it later. Tonight. It might be what she meant by burial." He nodded weakly, rubbing his arms now dotted with gooseflesh. When she looked back to the paper, the final lines had paled, text fading slowly into blankness, except for 3 words at the bottom gleaming in fresh black. "Thank you both." Her throat tightened. She blinked hard, thinking her vision deceived her. But the words remained visible another moment before vanishing completely, leaving only faint indentations on the page. He whispered, "You saw that, right?" She nodded slowly. "I think we just got our answer." The lamp guttered once and calmed. The cold withdrew. Wind began again outside, gentle and ordinary. Through the doorway came sunlight bright enough to warm the surface of the table. They didn't speak for several minutes. The farmhouse's quiet now carried peace, not expectation. When she finally folded the letter, it felt dry, inert, no longer breathing. "What now?" he asked. "We do what she asked," she said. "We find what's left behind and we make it rest." He glanced at the hearth hole they had opened, at the small box, waiting. "Then we finish tonight." She looked down at the pendant again. It glowed faint silver now in daylight, a tender color neither of them had seen on metal in years. Tonight, she echoed, voice steady. Somewhere deep within the frame of the house, wood responded with a single soft pop, almost affectionate, like the house itself exhaled, finally ready to let go. Dusk blurred the edges of the fields into silver haze as they carried the small wooden box to the work table. Everything else in the house had fallen still, as if even the insects paused to listen. The letter lay folded beside them, its edges browned but clean, the ink now dull as any old writing. She touched it once, then drew her hand back. The box seemed to absorb the room's remaining light. He took a slow breath. If we open this, we finish it. No going back to ignorance. We've already seen too much for ignorance, she said softly. Let's see what needed forgiving. Her fingers found the warped lid. The nails resisted, squealing faintly until the wood surrendered with a dry pop. A puff of air escaped, stale, heavy with salt and something sweetly rotten, like violets left too long in a jar. Inside lay a bundle wrapped in faded blue cloth. She lifted it carefully. Dust sifted down like fine ash. When she unfolded the cloth, small objects tumbled onto the table with delicate sounds. A handful of tiny carved animals, each no larger than a thumb. A coil of brittle ribbon the color of old bone. And at the bottom, the heart-shaped pendant, cleaned by light since morning until it glimmered pale silver. She whispered, "Toys." He nodded, eyes tracing their worn edges. Somebody's kept memory in a coffin. They arranged the figures gently between them. The shapes were crude but patient in detail. Horse, bird, and a doll without a face. Beneath the last figure lay a scrap of paper folded twice. The ink had faded to brown smears, yet one word still read clear. Mine. Her throat tightened. This isn't guilt, it's love. The air shifted, a low creak from ceiling beams, soft, responsive. He looked up. The house agrees. He picked up the pendant, rubbed dust from its surface. The initials matched the child's name from the letter, tiny and curling. The clasp, though rusted, moved easily, clicking like a sigh. "What do we do now?" he asked. "Give them rest. That's what the letter wanted." They prepared by lantern light. She fetched an old tin spade from the porch. He found a length of linen among their packing cloth. Together they wrapped the toys and ribbon again, the pendant set last on top. The gesture felt less like burial and more like promise. Outside, the wind carried faint scent of wet soil. They stepped into the twilight where grass brushed their boots, the field sloping toward a line of ash trees. The ground there looked lighter, disturbed years ago. Without a word, they both knelt and began to dig. The first scoop released earth dark and damp, smelling of rain and iron. The sound of the shovel bit deep, the rhythm of effort steadying their hearts. After several minutes, he paused to wipe his brow. The horizon burned faint gold, light retreating fast. She whispered, "Here's enough." They laid the bundle inside, linen glowing ghost pale against the soil. She traced a cross in air above it, not religious, just instinct. Then she began covering the little grave, handful by handful, until the earth lay smooth. When the last trace vanished, wind gusted once through the trees. A ripple of relief swept the field. He touched her shoulder. "It's done." She breathed out, long and trembling. "Listen." At first, only their breath. Then from the direction of the farmhouse came a soft humming, notes high and uncertain, like a child half remembering a lullaby. It rose, fell, and faded into the quiet again. He met her eyes. You heard that too? She nodded, tears glinting against fading light. She's saying goodnight. They lingered until stars began to pierce the thin clouds. The farmhouse windows glowed mild amber from the lantern they'd left inside. No more cold drafts drifted through the air. When they returned, the house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt hollowed clean. The boards underfoot gave warmer tones when stepped on, each sound softer. In the sitting room, they sat side by side before the hearth. He poured a mug of water from the jug. They'd restored the pump that morning. The taste, though metallic, carried freshness. He handed her a cup, still keeping his other hand near hers on the table. Feels strange, he said, like we've been holding someone's breath all week and finally let it go. She nodded slowly. Stranger part is, I feel lighter too. They stayed quiet a while. The lantern flame arced steadily between them, no flicker, no pulse of cold. Then, faint again, came the hum, a single bar of melody threading through floorboards, no louder than thought. Not sorrowful this time, playful, almost proud. She smiled. I think she likes the peace. He stared into the yellow flame. Maybe houses remember kindness as much as they remember pain. Her voice went softer. And people. He looked at her. We did something impossible together. Not impossible, she said, just long overdue. They rose to inspect the chimney one last time. The hollow gaped small but harmless now. No draft, no smell of iron. He replaced each brick gently, packing mortar with new care. When the final stone slid into its space, the sound resembled a heartbeat closing. She brushed soil from her hands. It's resting now. He nodded. So should we. But neither moved from where they stood, sensing the room adjusting, timbers stretching, settling, sighing as temperature shifted with evening cool. It felt like the place itself inhaled them into belonging. Later, near midnight, sleep drew them slow. He dreamed first, a gentle vision, a small figure standing in the yard near the ash trees, dress flicking in unseen breeze. Not threatening, just watching. The silhouette raised a hand before dissolving into mist. He woke calm. She stirred beside him, murmuring something indistinct but smiling as she said it. Dream, he whispered. She said, thank you, she answered without opening her eyes. He lay back, listening to the settling walls. Far away, an owl called once. Natural, definite. Life, returning. At dawn, they brewed coffee on the tiny gas burner. Sunlight poured in, unfiltered for the first time since they'd arrived, painting bright stripes across the wood. Dust shimmered gold instead of gray. The farmhouse had become a place of mourning again, not memory. She ran a hand along the wall they had once feared. Smooth, intact, ordinary. The cold spot gone. Do you feel that? He laughed softly. Nothing at all. Exactly. Breakfast carried an ease new to their voices. Plans slid naturally into talk. Tiling, painting, garden rows. Future instead of ghosts. Yet they both caught at different moments faint sensations. Warm creak near the stairs, breeze that smelled briefly of lavender. They traded small glances each time, no fear, only understanding. Later, she placed the pendant on the mantel, chain coiled neatly. Just one reminder, she said. He nodded. A good one. Through the open window swept morning light, touching the silver heart until it glowed bright as dawn itself. He reached an arm around her shoulder. Guess we bought more than a house. She chuckled quietly. Bought a story, fixed a soul. The farmhouse responded with soft pop from distant beam, an answering heartbeat. They both smiled. By afternoon, birds nested along the porch eaves. She planted the first seeds in soil near the ash trees, marking the spot not with stone, but with flowering herbs, something living. He painted over the repaired wall inside, humming the same three-note tune they'd heard in the field. As the day stretched, sun pooled warm across the thresholds. The hum of insects filled the air, and what once felt like isolation now sounded like harmony. In the evening, they returned to the grave under the trees. Wild mint already scented the disturbed soil. She knelt, pressing fingers into earth just enough to feel its softness. "She's part of this place now," she murmured. "Maybe always was," he said. As they walked back to the house, he asked, "Do we tell anyone?" She thought before answering. "There's no secret left to protect, only memory. Let's keep that between us and the house." Under the porch light, the door hinges made a contented groan. The inside air met them gentle and dry. That night, before turning off the lamp, she looked once more at the pendant reflecting faint moonlight from the mantel. For a heartbeat, she imagined the figure of a small girl turning joyfully in that beam, free at last. When the light dimmed, she whispered, "Sleep well." The reply came not in words, but in warmth, blooming quiet across the room, spreading through old wood and plaster, a lingering breath of peace. And for the first time since moving in, the couple slept without dreams, the farmhouse keeping its watch in silence, serene and whole once more. That night, the air thinned so gently that neither noticed at first. The lamps burned quiet, their light gold instead of trembling. Something in the stillness felt different, emptied, patient, like the house was deciding how to begin again. She sat near the window with a mug of water, tracing her finger along the rim, listening. He checked the circuit box, content to hear normal creaks instead of the tense murmurs that once followed every gust of wind. "You hear that?" she asked after a minute. "Hear what?" "Nothing. No drafts." He smiled faintly. "Guess we fixed the place after all." But he said it like he knew that wasn't the whole truth. The candles they had set along the hallway flickered toward the same direction, fluttering once as if in applause. She watched the flames lean, shiver, then stand straight again. "Feels like it's breathing easier," she murmured. He came up behind her, resting his chin lightly on her shoulder. "Or maybe we are." They stayed that way until the last candle went out. Sleep came quickly, softer than before. The faint scent of earth that once haunted the walls had faded into something warmer, like new paint or dry straw. Yet somewhere between waking and rest, she felt the touch of a dream slip over her like a familiar blanket. She stood in the restored hallway, moonlight pouring down from a skylight that did not exist in waking life. A shape hovered by the doorway, the small form of a child, clear enough to see her outline, not enough to know her face. The girl smiled, lifted one hand in easy motion, and then dissolved into light. The peace that followed was thick as summer air. She woke with tears on her cheeks and found his arm already around her. "You okay?" he whispered. "Yeah, just a dream." "Her?" She nodded. "She's okay now." He didn't ask how she knew, just held her tighter until both drifted back into steady sleep. When morning broke, pale gold spread through the cracks of the shutters, painting clean lines across the floorboards. The temperature held even. No cold spots, no breath of unseen drafts. She crossed the room barefoot, expecting chill, and found only the soft warmth of wood that had caught the sun. He joined her, coffee steaming in his hand. "Smells different," he said. Alive, she answered. Over breakfast, they laughed around small things: the tired state of their boots, the stubborn generator, the way the cat that wandered from the field now claimed their porch. The laughter sounded new in that house, touching every corner as if testing the acoustics of joy. When silence followed, it felt earned, not uneasy. Later, they started work again, patching remaining holes, painting trim near windows where the wind once sneaked in. Each brushstroke seemed to echo back a faint companion sound, wood absorbing color like conversation. "These walls remember," she said. "Then let's give them something better to keep." By midday, the light grew strong enough that they opened every door wide. Air rushed through the hallways without the usual moaning complaint. The curtain by the front room swayed, edges glowing. Outside, the field shimmered pale green, grass already recovering from neglect. They heard birdsong close, the rhythm blending with hammer strikes and soft conversation. The work lasted hours, but it never felt like labor. Whenever one turned to speak, the other was already looking. Near dusk, as they sealed the last section of molding, a warmth rolled through the corridor like a single, slow breath. The change was subtle. Dust lifted, a shimmer caught sunlight, then faded. He rubbed his neck. "Did you feel that?" "Yeah," she whispered, "like someone said thank you." He stepped back to watch the wall they had once broken open. Smooth, dry, perfectly ordinary now. "Can't believe we ever thought it was evil," he said. She shook her head. It was never evil, just hurt. They stood there a long time, letting quiet collect around their heartbeat. The soft metallic tick of a cooling pipe served as rhythm. The house no longer hid or demanded. It participated, moving with them like a living thing adjusting its posture. That night, they chose to sleep in the restored bedroom upstairs, real sheets on an actual bed frame rescued from storage. When they lay down, the ceiling above no longer sagged, but seemed to cradle them. The scent of fresh plaster replaced decay. She whispered into the half-dark, "Remember the first night? I thought everything here wanted us gone." He smiled. "Now I think it wanted witnesses. Maybe it needed help finding peace." He turned toward her, eyes soft. "We both did." Their fingers found each other's without ceremony. Rain began outside, a mild drizzle tapping on the roof in even rhythm. No hidden knocks this time, only the natural percussion of nature working through the night. "Half asleep," she murmured. "Listen to that. The sound doesn't scare me anymore." "It shouldn't," he said. "It's the new heartbeat." At dawn, she woke first to warm streaks of light crossing their blanket. The house felt lighter than air. This wasn't absence of presence, but fullness of calm. She went downstairs barefoot, the boards greeting her with docile murmurs instead of creaks. At the base of the stairs, she paused. Near the fireplace, the pendant gleamed brightly, even without direct light. It reflected something unseen for a moment, a soft shimmer across the wall in the shape of a small arc. Then the glow melted back into normal shine. He joined her moments later, following her gaze. "Reflection? Maybe." She smiled. "Or good morning." They spent the day marking plans for the next phase of restoration. Garden beds, new wiring, maybe a small workshop. Every note they wrote sounded like promise. When they paused for lunch, the light overhead flickered once. Gentle, rhythmic. Neither looked alarmed. She only said, "She approves." He laughed. "Then she has good taste." Later, after painting the last frame in the hallway, fatigue caught them. They took chairs to the porch again, letting wind move through tall grass. The smell of rain on soil rose sharp and sweet. Birds dove near the eaves. Out there, distance no longer felt lonely. It felt earned, shared. He glanced back at the house and said, "We should give her a name." She? The house, only polite since she's part of the family now. She thought for a moment. How about Reesthaven? He chuckled. Too poetic for a mechanic. I could call it the project, she teased. They laughed, and a rafter inside clicked softly, as if laughing back. Twilight deepened to indigo. A single light glowed in the window behind them, steady and golden. She folded her arms, whispering, "You think it's strange? Thanking a house?" "Not strange. Gratitude's a kind of repair." They watched stars appear, one after the other. Then she spoke again, gentle. "When we first got here, it felt like every nail held grief. Now, listen." They both sat still. The sound was hard to describe, less than a melody, more than wind. A faint harmonic vibration running through beams and floor, balanced perfectly with the rhythm of crickets outside. The farmhouse hummed. He smiled slowly. "That's new. That's life. We restored it together." She leaned against him, head on shoulder. "Think she'll keep that hum when winter comes?" Maybe. Maybe it'll be our reminder that peace has its own sound. A soft rustle came from inside, like cloth being lifted from air. She tilted her head. Through the doorway's half-open line, she saw movement only a second long, a light shape circling, then fading near the staircase. No fear touched her, just warmth, like greeting an old friend in passing. "She's home," she said. He squeezed her hand once, silent agreement. They stayed outside until the lamp burned low and stars filled the valley sky. When they finally went in, the air inside felt completely balanced. No more dark corners or whispering vents. Every board, every hinge at ease. They climbed the stairs quietly, pausing midway as one more gentle puff of wind swept through behind them, not cold but pleasant, ruffling their hair. They turned together, expecting nothing, yet sensing everything. The entryway gave off a faint glow, moonlight bouncing from the pendant on the mantel. It cast a delicate reflection upward, forming a fleeting outline, the curve of a child's smile catching light, vanishing before the next blink. He whispered, "Good night." The reflection shimmered once, like answering. Upstairs, as they closed the bedroom door, the faint hum of the house deepened into a purr. Steady, rounded, continuous. She lay down, watching green moonlight trace patterns over the ceiling. "Can you feel it?" He nodded. "The heartbeat?" She smiled. "Ours and hers." For the first time since arrival, their dreams carried laughter instead of silence. The farmhouse no longer waited. It lived alongside them, its story finished, its music beginning anew. By the time midsummer reached the valley, the farmhouse gleamed with a new coat of whitewash, its edges sharp against the horizon. The air smelled of cut hay and drying paint. Inside, sunlight filtered through clear panes that no longer rattled, falling over furniture they'd salvaged and sanded back to life. The house had grown quiet in a different way now. Content finished. They were at the kitchen table one afternoon, sorting through receipts and repair lists, when a knock echoed against the newly varnished door. It was deliberate, steady, not the curious tap of a passerby. He wiped his hands on his jeans and went to answer. A woman stood on the porch, a stranger, mid-30s maybe, with a camera slung across her neck and a notebook tucked under her arm. "Sorry to drop in out of nowhere," she began, smiling quickly. I'm from the Historical Society. We've heard rumors that you uncovered something unusual during renovations. He hesitated. Rumors move fast out here. She nodded. They usually start before they should. I hoped to confirm what's true. His partner joined him in the doorway, curiosity plain on her face. We've mostly been focused on restoration, she said carefully. What kind of confirmation are you looking for? Anything about the house's early owners, the visitor replied. Records went missing decades ago. Flooded archive, they say. I'm compiling a study on undocumented homesteads. This property shows up blank after 1919, which is rare. He shrugged. Blank sounds peaceful to me. The woman smiled at his deflection but didn't step away. You'd be surprised how often blank means something hidden. Could I look around? I promise minimal intrusion. They exchanged glances. The hesitation between them wasn't fear, but protectiveness. Still, politeness prevailed. He opened the door wider. One tour. We like honesty more than rumor. Inside, the light made everything seem generous. The fresh walls, the scent of timber polish. The woman took a slow walk through the rooms, her camera clicking softly. New energy, she said admiringly. It feels settled. Wasn't always, he said. You'd have run off the first week. At the west room doorway, she paused. This is where people say the secret was found. He tightened his jaw. People say many things. His partner stepped in gently. We uncovered a sealed section, yes. No treasure, no danger, just a neglected story. That's all. May I see? The visitor asked. The couple looked at each other again. Then she reached for the latch and opened the replastered panel. Behind it, the rebuilt inner wall gleamed pale pink under the afternoon light. Smooth, flawless, ordinary. We closed it again, she said quietly. It deserved privacy. The historian scanned the surface. Any records of who built the room? None that survived, he said, and we stopped looking. She studied them both, noting the tone behind their words, a boundary marked not by secrecy but respect. You think someone was buried there? That's the story around town. He gave a short breath of laughter. People need closure. Ghost tales fit easier than grief. Her eyes softened. Grief does cling to wood, though. You can feel it in the grain sometimes. She gestured toward her notebook. Mind if I record impressions? No names, no photos of you, just dates. Write what you like, his partner said, so long as you write truth. The woman scribbled, occasionally glancing at the walls as though listening. You've done good work. Few restore instead of replacing. Places appreciate that. As she moved to leave, something subtle changed in the air, a low vibration curling where sunlight struck the paint. The couple felt it, faint hum threading through floorboards like a breeze. The visitor tilted her head. You have electrical running through here, right? Not yet, he answered. The silence that followed was full, but not awkward. She smiled knowingly. Some houses hum after renovation. It's expansion, new warmth meeting old structure, nature's approval. He almost told her that he agreed, that it did feel like approval, but decided against it. The hum eased as quickly as it had come. On the porch, she closed her notebook. There's one thing. Our background index lists a family named Ambrose connected to this property before records stopped. Carpenter by trade, 2 children, wife deceased winter of 1918. Never relocated. His partner frowned. Ambrose? That name never appeared in the documents we got from the bank. It wouldn't, the visitor said. They vanished before the county took over. People whispered illness or accident. I thought you'd want to know since you found remnants. He nodded slowly. We'll keep the knowledge. Thank you. She offered a friendly hand. If you ever decide to let the Historical Society include this home, we could preserve it outwardly. No ghost stories, just human record. We'll think on it, his partner said with a polite smile. Maybe when the story's ready to be told. The historian glanced past them one last time into the cool shade of the hall. Places like this permit only careful memory, she said softly. Tell it honest, and they'll stay restful. Then she stepped down the porch and crossed the gravel drive, camera glinting once, before she reached her car. For a moment after she left, the field quiet grew close around them again. Cicadas buzzed, wind carrying the scent of warm dust. He turned to his partner. So, someone had vanished here. You think that's her? The child? There were two, she murmured, remembering the letter's single initial. Maybe this was one's house of memory, the other's place of surrender. He wrapped an arm around her. We can't change their story, but maybe we anchored it. She looked at the freshly painted wall through the doorway. The sunlight had shifted, burning a line down the center like a dividing fold between past and present. Do we tell the historian everything? He hesitated. Tell her what? About the voice, the lights, the note that changed its own words? She'd turn that into theory, not truth. She seemed sensitive enough. He shrugged. Let the archive sleep a little longer. They stepped back inside. Dust motes hung still above the restored floor. The feeling wasn't haunting now, but companionship, the way a cat curls near your foot without breaking silence. She exhaled. Imagine her searching through the files, seeing blank pages. Maybe those blanks exist so the rest of us can fill them gently. He smiled. Then we'll fill ours with today. Afternoon drifted toward evening. They settled by the hearth again, filing invoices, small talk flowing like normal rhythm. When the first star appeared outside the window, he said, Do you ever think about what she left us? The pendant? No, the lesson. She thought, then said, that peace isn't found, it's made, and it asks for courage. He nodded, and honesty. The clock ticked faint in the background, ordinary and grounding. For a long moment they heard only that steady measure. Then, so quietly it might have been imagination, the faint hum returned. One shimmering chord running through the boards, fading into dusk. She smiled at the sound. Even skeptics get their proof sometimes. He chuckled. Let's keep that between us and the walls. Later, before turning in, they stood together at the porch rail. Fireflies gathered above the grass like scattered sparks, mirroring stars beyond the roof. The air was warm enough that the faint vibration of life, frogs, wind, low hum of timber, merged into one quiet hymn. He said, When the historian publishes her notes, it'll just read, Restored farmhouse, owners private, atmosphere serene. Her eyes glowed in reflected porch light. Perfect record, just what we wanted. A thin breeze stirred the chimes they'd hung by the door. The tones rang clear, blending with the receding hum from inside, the house answering in kind. Between them, peace felt tangible again, earned, held, and shared. By late autumn, the air held that cool sweetness that announces peace more than change. The fields bowed low with pale grass, the farmhouse standing straight and calm against the light. From the outside, no one could have guessed how much of its silence had been rewritten. Inside, the scent of soap and crushed mint filled rooms that had once smelled of rain and rust. The couple moved through them with the confidence of routine, making coffee, sorting mail, plans blooming easily between words. The walls seemed to smile, paint dried clean. The hum that once came only at night now lingered faintly when morning sun hit the beams just right. She said it was the sound of warmth stretching through wood. He preferred to think of it as the house remembering them. The kitchen looked different now. Whitewashed boards, simple table, herbs lined along the sill. He carved a new shelf for the pendant, setting it next to the small wooden toy they'd kept as quiet proof. When the heart-shaped charm caught a sunbeam, it projected a quick flash across the opposite wall, a tiny spark of silver that vanished before speech. She said the light looked like laughter. They brewed their coffee strong that morning, standing side by side as steam ribboned upward. He said, "We should invite the historian back sometime. Let her see it alive." "She'll think we staged the piece," she replied, half smiling. He laughed easily. "Good. Let her believe structure alone can fix things." Then his tone softened. "Truth is, it's not what we uncovered, it's how we treated it after." The porch door opened with its new, friendly groan. Outside lay the garden she'd built in late summer, rows of herbs, wildflowers, lavender circling the old ash tree that now marked the resting spot. The mint had rooted strong, its leaves shining wet from dew. She knelt to touch the soil, cool against her skin. "Smell that?" she asked. He inhaled. "Better than any air filter." They stayed there a long time, watching low clouds chase each other along the horizon. At their backs, the house creaked once in the wind, not complaints, but conversation. That afternoon, work turned light. He mended a fence by the edge of the property while she scrubbed the window panes until they gleamed. Inside, sunlight refracted through clear glass and built tiny rainbows across the floor. Each color stripe felt like a gift returned from the quiet beneath the plaster. When she looked up, the reflection of her own motion blurred softly over the wall, a glimmering echo that seemed to tilt its head the way the small spirit once had. By evening, they were both tired but easy. He hung his worn jacket by the door. "Feels like we live here now," he said. "We do." She handed him a mug of tea. "And so does she." "You still feel her?" She looked around the room slowly, taking in each repaired corner. "Not like before. It's different now, like she's folded into everything. This light, that beam, the warmth in the floor. Present, but quiet." He nodded. That's what home should be. Supper was simple soup and fresh bread. They ate by lamplight, laughter rising between spoon clinks. When she leaned back in her chair, the amber glow washed over her face, catching in her eyes a calm he hadn't seen since before all the tearing and discovery. "You know," she said, "at first I thought fixing the house would fix us. Turns out it worked the other way." He reached for her hand. "We fixed it because we stopped rushing to escape what scared us." Outside, the wind hushed for a moment. The boards under their chairs gave one soft groan, like agreement. After cleaning up, they walked through each room, turning off lights gradually. Each step felt ceremonial, affirming ownership through gentleness rather than claim. In the hall, she paused before the west wall, fingertips brushing painted surface that now bore no trace of seams. "You think the story ends here?" she whispered. He came beside her, voice low. "Stories like this don't end. They just start breathing differently." They stood silent a heartbeat longer. From behind the wall came no hum, no whisper, only ease. The house exhaled with them, They smiled and continued upstairs. On the landing hung the restored photograph of the farmhouse from decades past, the one with small hands once printed against the glass. They'd cleaned the frame and rehung it where sunlight could touch it each morning. Now, when night lights from the field reached through the window, her reflection aligned perfectly with those tiny handprints. She noticed, lifted her own palm, and let its shadow meet theirs. The image merged, one gesture bridging across time. Downstairs, the clock they'd found in the attic ticked softly, exact for the first time since their arrival. Midnight, no longer, belonged to fear. It marked steadiness. Toward dawn, rain returned, fine, silvery drizzle scattering against panes. The sleep that followed was deep, anchored by comfort. Her dreams carried peaceful images, the child twirling through a garden of mint, the farmhouse stretching taller, sunlight climbing through every window. She woke smiling. He already stood by the window, mug in hand. Smell that rain. Smells like clean start. Think she'd like what we've done with the place? She helped. She's in the blue paint, the garden, even the silence. He nodded toward the doorway. The pendant on the shelf caught morning light again, scattering it in thin arcs along the floor. Guess she's saying yes, he murmured. After breakfast, they sat down with sketch paper, drafting what came next. A proper workshop for her repairs, new fencing, maybe a guest room in the attic. The list felt endless, but exciting. Can't believe we ever called this house cursed, he said. It was just lonely, she answered. Lonely things make strange noises. At noon, the clouds broke apart entirely. Sun warmed the stone steps, drying everything fast. She moved through the room's airing curtains, humming softly. He listened from the porch, to her voice mixing with birdsong. The melody drifted upward, light and searching. For a second, before she noticed him, he saw the faint shimmer pass behind her, like air bending joyfully, gone when she turned. When afternoon settled, they took their usual walk to the old tree line. The grave mound there had grown over with herbs and tiny blue flowers. Bees moved lazily between stems. She knelt again, brushing away fallen leaves. Still watching us, she said. He placed a smooth stone beside the flowers. And we're still listening. They stayed there, holding hands, until shadows grew long enough to reach back toward the house. The farmhouse looked golden in twilight, every window gracing the fading sky with gentle rectangles of warmth. Looks proud, he said. She should be. At dinner, they toasted with wine from town. He raised his glass. To ghosts who remind people to live. To houses that forgive, she added. They touched glasses lightly. The sound rang clear, echoing once before dissolving into laughter. When they stepped out for air, the sky stretched deep violet. A soft sound floated from inside, distinct yet calm. It was laughter, brief and airy, coming from the hallway. Instead of tension, amusement crossed their faces. There she goes, he said. Happy? She replied simply. And she was. The farmhouse glowed behind them, its timbers resonant with quiet life. Together they stood beneath that sky, hands intertwined, framed in lamplight spilling from the open door. The hum inside joined the chorus of crickets, forming one continuous sound of renewal. She turned to him, expression thoughtful. Places carry everything we do to them. Maybe kindness lasts longest. Then let's keep giving it, he said. Far inside, a single beam clicked like punctuation, closing a story without sorrow. They looked toward tomorrow and, for the first time, saw only days alive with color, paint to dry, gardens to tend, peace to maintain. And as night wrapped the valley, the farmhouse stood not as a relic or warning, but as proof that repair, in any form, begins the same way. It listens. Evening arrived with the kind of calm that feels earned. The sun bent low across the valley, pouring amber through the farmhouse windows until every grain of wood shimmered. Inside, nothing creaked in protest, only the gentle pop of cooling beams, the hush of wind moving through open sills. She stood near the doorway, wiping paint from her fingers, watching how light traced the repaired walls. He joined her, shoulders brushing as they faced the horizon. "Looks different every sunset," he said. "Maybe it's reflecting us now," she replied. The words felt simple, true. Beyond the porch, the ash tree stirred, its leaves glinting like tiny mirrors. A faint breeze carried the scent of mint and fresh soil from the small garden. The notes of distant birds circled them, blending with the faint hum inside, the steady rhythm of a house alive again. They turned toward the interior, quiet a moment longer. The pendant on the shelf caught a sudden ray of sun, scattering small sparks against the ceiling. She smiled. She always chooses the perfect time. He squeezed her hand. Feels like she wanted this moment, not us. "No," she said softly. "It's all of us." As dusk deepened, the fields folded into shadow, and orange light mellowed into silver. The couple stood framed against it, silhouettes marked by warmth, not fear. The farmhouse behind them glowed with even tone, no glare, no gloom, just calm breathing through wood. He whispered, "Ready for tomorrow?" She nodded. "For the rest of it." They lingered until the last thread of sunlight slipped away. The house settled once more, releasing one final sigh that blended perfectly with night air. Places, she thought, remember kindness the way people remember love, quietly, forever. Then, before stepping in, she added almost playfully, "Let's find the next story waiting under paint somewhere." Their laughter joined the soft hum inside, fading together into evening peace.